Thank you very much. So I want to thank President Probst members of the Board of Trustees, distinguished faculty, friends and family of today's graduates, because you've suffered and supported a lot, and most importantly, the soon-to-be graduated State College of Florida's class of 2013. It is an honor to stand in front of you on this special day. Now, Carol did a really good job of introducing me as a futurist, but people always say to me, oh, you're the first futurist I've ever met. You know, what does that mean? I define what I do as being a catalyst to get people, institutions in the world to think about the future and then to facilitate a conversation about it. It is so important to think about the future, and most people think they do, but they don't really think about it. They just think about their plans. So you are being graduated in one of the most incredible times in human history. We have a new millennium, we have a new century, we have a new age, and relatively into a new decade. That has never happened before in human history. Certainly a millennium and a century, but not also an age and a decade. Now we're here in 2013, so we're a little bit more than 1% through this new millennium, the third millennium. 1% through the new millennium. The last time that could be said was the year 1013. Vikings ruled the seas. Dark ages in Europe. If you accept an easy premise that the speed of change is 10 times as fast as it was in the depth of the Dark Ages, then all of the change that we, humanity, has experienced in the last 1,000 years would be replicated in the next 100. If you accept this futurist theory, that I can fairly well argue, that all the speed of change is 100 times faster than when the Vikings ruled the seas, then all of the change of the last 1,000 years would be replicated in the next 10. So as you go forth in your life, sometime between the next 10 years and the next 100 years, a millennium's worth of change will occur, and you need to be part of it and create it. Now, the shift age. I'm known for having coined the phrase, the shift age. We've left the information age, we've entered the shift age. We've gone through about a 4-year reorganizational recession between two ages. Every new age has its own characteristics and its own forces. So about 10 years ago, when I was reflecting on this, that we were entering a new age, I tried to define what the three forces of this new age we're all in are. And they are very simply three. The flow to global. We're getting organized around all of us, not just a global economy, but every aspect of human society and culture is becoming globalized. So globalization is no longer just an economic term. In fact, we are in the global stage of human evolution. At the same time we're getting organized around all of us, we're getting organized around each of us. Many of the graduates are too young to know this, but over the last 40 years, there's been an explosion of choice everywhere. Ways to watch television, ways to read books, ways to listen to music, brands of toothpaste, brands of chips. And whenever there's an explosion of choice, the power moves from the producer to the consumer, from the institution to the individual. So we as individuals and graduates, soon to be graduates, you as individuals are more powerful than individuals have ever been in history. And both of these forces, the flow to global, the flow to the individual, are accelerated by one of the most significant occurrences in human history and the most powerful force at play in the planet today, the accelerating electronic connectedness of the planet. We're getting ever more connected. To give you a simple idea, there's a little more than 7 billion of us on this planet, humans. 5.6 billion humans have cell phones. So if you take away all the people who live in the Himalayas and the Andes and all of those under the age of 8, say, you have cell phone ubiquity. Now, what does that mean? You know, we all think that technology is the future. It's not that technology is the future. It's what technology creates and changes with humanity. So if I were to call any one of the graduates here, you're maybe 50, 75 feet away from me on my cell phone. You know, I had your cell phone number, 1002, 1003, 1004. 5 seconds, your phone would ring. If I were to call somebody 12,000 miles away on another continent, maybe another 2 seconds because of the relay of the satellite in space. So cell phone ubiquity means that the difference between 50 feet and 12,000 miles is 2 seconds. And of course, when you're on the phone, hey, how you doing? And can you hear me okay? What's one of the next things you say? So where are you? Or where are you at, right? So there is no time, distance, or place any longer limiting human communication. That's the world into which you're being graduated. That's a very profound thing. There's no time, distance, or place. Place has gone away. Nobody in this auditorium picked their parents, which means nobody in this auditorium chose where you were raised. And where you were raised affects who you are. If you're born in Alabama, it's different than if you're born in Boston or South Florida. So all of a sudden, we are the first iteration of humanity for whom we're stepping out of place and into space, the global space of cyberspace. Now, I talk about this new decade, and I mentioned that we're in a new decade. So we're in a new millennium, 1% through. We're a little more than 10%, 13% through this new century. We're a few years into this new age, and we're 3 years into this decade, 2010 to 2020. Now, you will recall back in some of you, maybe not some of the graduates, but certainly some of your parents and the distinguished faculty standing behind me. Remember 1999? Remember that? What are you going to do New Year's Eve, right? Because 4 digits, it's going to be the new millennium. Well, obviously the new millennium was 2000 to 2001. But because we're so odometer oriented in this country, 4 digits were going to turn over. So same thing happened in 2009. I was down here on a writing retreat in Sarasota, and the media kept saying, what's this new decade, 2010 to 20? So I threw in the towel. And on 01/01/10, interesting digital date, I called it the transformation decade. The dictionary definition of transformation is a change in nature, shape, character, and form, which means this is the decade, 2010 to 2020, when most of humanity's institutions and much of our thought and the foundations of our thought are going to undergo a change in nature, shape, character, and form. So I say to CEOs around the world, if you're not changing the nature, shape, character, and form of your institution, you may not have one in 2020. And you can see all the change that's gone on with the State College of Florida. They are transforming themselves. So you are being graduated into the transformation decade. And the thing you have to remember is that, what happened here? Excuse me. What you have to remember is that this decade changes everything. I've been saying that legacy thinking is going to fall away in this decade. The legacy thinking of the past. If you're over 40, it means, for example, you've spent most of your life in the 20th century. So most of your thought has been shaped by the 20th century. And it's real clear that the developed countries of the world, the United States, certainly politicians in Washington, have powered into the 21st century with the legacy thinking of the 20th. So I always say to people, if you thought something became true, like your business mentor or your favorite professor or your dad or your mom said, this is the way it is in 1990, 1995, and you're not checking that to see if it's still valid in 2013, it's as though you're standing in a house built of legacy thinking, and through the windows you're looking at the present, you can't even see the future. So this is the decade where that thinking is going to fall away. So part of what your mission is, graduating class of 2013, is to come up with the new thinking to replace the old thinking. You're one of the first graduating classes in the United States, 2013, to really have that opportunity, to be going into the workplace, going on to higher ed, with the knowledge that the thinking of the 20th century is about ready to collapse. So what does that mean? It means that 2010 to 2020 is the first decade of 21st century thought, because we powered in with a legacy thinking. An easy way to get you to think of that, for those of you that studied history in the class and those older members of the audience, is to think about the phrase 20th century. 20th century, whatever comes to mind. Century of science, century of World War, the American century, really began with 1914 to 1918. World War I, Russian Revolution, general theory of relativity, the map of Europe, as we know, and unfortunately the Europeans created the map of the Middle East, you know, those right angles in the middle of the desert. All of these stories of the last 100 years have really come from that second decade. So I think future historians are going to look back, you know, 2100, 2110, you know, 2090, and say 2010 to 2020 is the decade when humanity first started thinking 21st century thought. So that is the larger responsibility, graduates, that you're stepping into. You have to step up and create 21st century thought. You have to be bold, you have to be different. The United States of America has been and is, and as an American, I feel patriotically, always will be the greatest country in the world. But everything is in a state of dynamic change. Everything is changing its nature, shape, character, and form. So it is incumbent upon you, the future of the United States of America, the future of Florida, the future of all your professions, to really start thinking 21st century thought. That's your highest responsibility. Now, no matter where you go in your workplace, whatever you do, whether you go into higher education, you have to take your part as this pivotal generation. Largely speaking, I would submit that most of the graduates are in their 20s, which means you're millennials. The millennial generation is going to be looked back on as one of the greatest generations in human history. There's a generational change that's going to occur in the next 10 to 15 years around the world, whereby the millennials, as I've traveled around the world in all 6 continents and spoken, the millennial generation, those in their 20s, are more like each other around the world than they are like their parents. So you have to understand that as a generation, you're stepping into greatness and leadership over the next 15 years. So this is a really profound time to be graduated. It's a profound time to begin your profession. Now, commencement, you think, is an ending, right? But commencement, by definition, is a beginning. One thing you have to remember as you are being graduated is that your education is not over. We have moved from being a knowledge society to a learning society, lifelong learning. You will spend the rest of your life, if you want to stay current, if you want to come up with 21st century thought, constantly learning. Things are changing too rapidly for you not to always be learning, to paraphrase a certain play. So I ask you to be vision-driven today. I'm vision-driven, I'm a futurist, I live in the vision. What is the vision of your personal goals? What is the vision of your community goals? What is the vision of your professional goals? What is the vision for you as a member of the emerging leadership generation of this country and this planet? Hold a vision. And when you hold a vision, believe me, people will tell you you're wrong. I left CBS, the #1 sales guy in CBS, to go start something where there was only 10% penetration of cable in the United States, and became MTV. People told me I was nuts. Then we launched Headline News. Then we launched Nickelodeon and VH1. And then in the 90s, I started creating online courses. Well, that will never work, right? So you're going to be told that your vision, oh, temper that down, it's a reality. Remember who's telling you that and how old they are, because they're probably coming from 20th century thought. So if you're coming up against living your vision, living your dream, stepping up into leadership, and somebody says, no, that's not the way it's done, ask them when they first thought that thought. And the chances are it'll be the 20th century. You go, well, this is the 20th century. Let's have a conversation about the way it's going to be. That's what you have to live. And you have to lead the conversations of what we are going to be, however you want to define we. Family, community, the United States, humanity. That's your task. So there was a quote that has always fueled me, because I've always had arrows in my back. I always did things that people said weren't going to happen. I always thought things that people said weren't going to be. I always made forecasts, oh, that will never come true. And to get through life, you know, you have to have things that you can turn to keep you going. So the great Spanish philosopher Schopenhauer has a quote that has fueled me all my life, and I submit to you that you should remember this quote as you go forth, as you prosper, as you create happiness and be happy, and create wealth and share wealth. In the revelation of any truth, Schopenhauer said, there are 3 stages. In the first, it is ridiculed. In the second, it is resisted. And in the third, it is considered self-evident. The world is flat. You know, that's the reality. No, it isn't. In the revelation of any truth, there are 3 stages. In the first, it is ridiculed. You may be ridiculed. In the second, it is resisted. You may meet resistance. And in the third, what you want to do, what you want to think, who you want to be will be considered self-evident. So keep that quote in mind as you go forth. And so in closing, in these short comments, I just want to say, as a futurist, as an American, if somebody's standing in front of you in 2013 on this wonderful day of celebration, that I'm really honored to be looking at the people who are going to create 21st century thought in America. Thank you very much.